Thank you, sir, for the opportunity to make a few comments on the second reading of the Canterbury Earthquake Commemoration Day Bill, and take a moment to reflect on the 6 years that I had in Christchurch in the later years of the 1960s into 1970 as a student of Canterbury University, and in particular, and most fortuitously, as a student of what was known as the town site, those beautiful buildings to which I always used to return whenever I was in the square, in the centre of Christchurch, to take a moment's rest on the seats in the old courtyard where we used to gather as students, and to enjoy the beauty of that city. And to take a moment too to reflect on the 60 plus years of my life and the small and larger tragedies that have from time to time befallen the people of this country. Most poignantly for me, Tangawai in 1953. And as it has been with those tragedies, so it has been and so it will be with Christchurch. The rescue of the trapped, the rescue and the treatment of the injured, the recovery of the lost and the mourning of them, the reflection about the power of nature, but also the reflection about the power of human love and that spirit that we all have that can never, ever be beaten. And so as those qualities were brought to other tragedies, so they are being brought to and will continue to be brought to Christchurch and to Canterbury. And the lives of the people that are affected will be rebuilt, and the city also will be rebuilt. Thank you.
The Honourable Marianne Street.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to begin by recognising and paying tribute to those who have lost their lives in the 22nd of February earthquake in Canterbury. I want also to think of their loved ones and the people who are grieving for them, and also wish to acknowledge those who have been injured and who are still suffering and trying to recover from serious injury. For some, the mental injury will be the difficult issue to deal with, and that will linger for a long time. Mr. Speaker, just a few minutes ago on my BlackBerry, I received a photo, and it was a photo of the US-NZ Partnership Forum, of which I was a part, taken at the AMI Stadium about an hour before the earthquake struck. It was a forum that consisted of some very high-powered US delegates. Fortunately, the largest congressional visit to this country that there had ever been had left earlier that morning for Wellington and was so out of harm's way. However, Kurt Campbell, the Assistant Secretary of State, Christopher Hill, a past Assistant Secretary of State, numerous business leaders from the United States, corporate dignitaries, a retired senator, only recently retired senator, and their wives and partners were all assembled with their New Zealand counterparts. It's good to have this lovely picture taken across the breadth of the AMI Stadium at that time. By the time the earthquake struck, Mr. Speaker, the conference had divided up into small groups to go out and visit and have lunch briefings with Christchurch businesses. I was out at Tate Electronics, out towards the airport. Others were dispersed around the city, a circumstance which gave the American ambassador, as he said to me later, 2 hours of panic as he tried to assemble all his compatriots from around the city. And I want to pay a tribute to those defence personnel and the staff at the Antarctic Centre, where by about 4:30 we had all assembled, mostly in one piece. And people had been evacuated from around the city and assembled together by the good officers of the American Embassy, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and every remotely official person who was connected with the NZ-US Partnership Forum. Stephen Jacoby, who chairs that forum, or leads that forum in fact, deserves particular mention for his professionalism and his concern and care for our United States guests. At 12:59 we just finished having a briefing at Tate Radio, actually, the Tate Radio part of Tate Electronics. And we'd just been told that we were in one of the safest possible buildings, a round building, a single-storied building. And so it proved to be. When the earthquake struck with the bang that I'm not used to, coming from Taranaki, I'm used to hearing them before they arrive or feeling them as little shudders building into a larger one. But this explosion took us all completely by surprise. And then the ferocity of the shudder, the sideways movement, was truly frightening. And then the power went out and the lights went off. And the 10 of us or so who were around that lunch table dived under the table with glassware and crockery flying and smashing around us. When the power came on through the backup system that Tate had, we all went outside and the staff had been evacuated outside. And then phone calls started and the stories started coming back immediately. 2 sentences I remember particularly, Mr. Speaker, from a woman who worked for Tate, who was standing just a couple of metres away from me, obviously phoning in to a loved one in the central city, saying, "Gosh, that was big, wasn't it?" And then suddenly her face changed. And she started repeating for those of us around her what she was hearing. The 2 sentences I recall most vividly were, "The cathedral's down. There are dead people." And suddenly the enormity of it began to strike us. As we evacuated, and I took a couple of American guests under my wing, they were very shocked by this event, but I took them to the airport, which by that stage had been evacuated. We took refuge in the Sedema Hotel. After a short time, the American Embassy got messages through to their delegates saying, "If you are near to the Antarctic Centre, go there." Of course, the Antarctic Centre is a matter of metres away from the Sedema Hotel, out by the airport. And so we walked to the Antarctic Centre. That building wasn't in terribly good nick either. Bits of ceiling had fallen in, but it was better than many others had experienced. By 8 o'clock that night, all of the American guests and many of the New Zealanders present at the NZ-US Forum had been evacuated by Hercules to Wellington, feeling very lucky to have got out so quickly. So to those Defence Force personnel and to the officials that rallied every available service, I want to pay a tribute. I also want to pay a tribute to the Christchurch-based members in this House from all sides who've been working with your people, alongside your people, assisting them in their grief and in their catastrophic disruption of their lives. You have our support. And if there is anything practical we can do, if staying away is the best thing we can do, then those members only need to let us know. I want to make another comment, Mr. Speaker, that is about the Memorial Day. And I want to reflect on two cultures that are not my own. One is Māori and the other is Jewish culture. Both of them have something in common. They both wait a year after an event, after a bereavement. They wait a year and then they return to the place and they unveil a headstone. I can't help thinking, Mr. Speaker, with all the reverence that I can muster for the people of Christchurch, that this Memorial Day is too soon. A year from now, when people are learning to live with their grief, with the grief that they cannot see a way through at the moment, but when they are learning to live with it, that they can return to a place and we can grieve collectively. Mr. Speaker, immediately after I returned to Wellington, I had to go to China for an official visit that had already been scheduled. Can I say that at every formal meeting I attended in China, they began with a tribute to New Zealand and the expression of their condolences for the earthquake victims and the suffering that people were enduring in New Zealand. I, in return, was able to thank them for that and express our condolences for those Chinese students who perished in the CTV building collapse. In addition, I was able to thank them for President Hu Jintao's very generous financial contribution, $500 million to New Zealand. But in addition to that, thank them for their immediate dispatching of search and rescue teams to assist us. They know what it's like, Mr. Chairman. I visited the Tangshan Earthquake Memorial, and they have a dignified memorial there to 240,000 people who lost their lives in 1976. They know what it's like, Mr. Speaker. Around the world, regardless of numbers or scale, grief and loss are the same. Kia ora koutou.